Well, for many obvious reasons, including the most obvious reason, Oregon needs a win this week. But Dan Lanning needs it more.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. It is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, the number one sports podcast network out there. Thank you all so much, especially my everydayers, for making that possible. Keys and players to watch, because I've got another crossover tomorrow with Roman. Thoughts on Kenyon Sadiq and more from the mailbag on this show, which is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the FanDuel app today. Washington in Seattle, home playoff game, definitely on the line. Access to the playoff at all for Oregon to go get its first ever national championship in football, that is certainly on the line. But more than anything, when you think about this game, I've tried to dodge this topic, honestly, because it might not be the most pleasant thing for Oregon fans to hear, but Dan Lanning has to win this game. And yeah, Oregon could still be banged up going into this one. DeCorian Moore, Evan Stewart, is the offensive line healthy? I don't know. We'll find out. Oregon showed last week without those guys what they are capable of. So barring Dante Moore going down in this game, God forbid, Dan Lanning's got to win this game. Remember how it started against Washington? Wasn't great. Was pretty excruciating, as a matter of fact. A trio of 3-point losses. Now, I expected them to lose one of those games. The last time Oregon played in Seattle, that was probably the least popular I have ever been with Oregon fans since I started hosting this particular program, because I picked Oregon to lose. I was incredibly frustrated and disappointed when they did lose because of the manner in which they did it, but I did expect them to lose that game. I do not have the same feeling with this one. Oregon, according to our friends at FanDuel, is about a 6.5-point favorite. In college football, that's well within upset range from an odds-setting standpoint. I do think Oregon is more than capable of covering that particular number. Washington this year has played really well for the most part. The ugly weather game, they're not quite ready for that sort of contest, or at least they weren't earlier this season against Wisconsin. I think they still have some more work to do in the trenches, which I think is one of Oregon's biggest advantages, and I think is Oregon's greatest strength, quite frankly, as I talked about yesterday with Roman on our crossover. But Washington lost to Wisconsin, Washington lost to Ohio State, Washington lost on the road to Michigan. So the Huskies so far are looking for kind of that prove-it win, and Illinois was that to an extent. Illinois is a good team. Illinois is not a great team. We know Oregon's a great team, and in a rivalry spot like this game means a ton to Washington. But since Dan Lanning arrived, he's beaten the Huskies just one time. It was last year, and though Oregon played the way that I'd want them to in that spot, winning 49-21, it was kind of close for a first half, but Oregon had control and then opened things up in the third quarter. This game has bigger stakes than that matchup did, because Oregon was going to be in the playoff no matter what, since they were 11-0 at this point last season instead of 10-1. And yeah, of course, they had to win to go to the Big Ten championship game, but in retrospect, yeah, losing that game would have said more about the rivalry and that cloud kind of hanging over the program than it would have what Oregon's season actually could have been. And hey, take it from Ohio State fans. Maybe losing to your arch rival for a close game again when you're favored to win, maybe that's all you need to jumpstart your locker room and go win a national championship. So that's the upside. If Oregon were to follow in this game, is maybe that would be the spark, presuming Oregon gets into the playoff. But for Dan Lanning in this spot, I think an honest conversation about this matchup starts with how the Husky series for him began, and not what happened last year, where Oregon played the way they should have, and it was incredibly satisfying and fun to watch for Duck fans, I'm sure, and for me as well. But that was also Jed Fish's first year, and a team that on paper didn't have any chance of keeping up with Oregon. Well, this team for Washington is a lot closer. Oregon is still better, is why they're favored, but they're better on paper. That doesn't always translate to what happens on the scoreboard. So if Oregon were to go to Seattle and lose, there would be a lot of questions depending on how everything goes, obviously about the team and why they weren't able to find a way to win. But most importantly, I think it would reflect poorly on the coaching staff. And I know that Tosh has been tied to Cal and Will Stein has been tied to some other jobs. A lot of people are dealing with that, including Jed Fish at Washington, by the way. Now, I don't think he's going to be Florida's head coach. I know that he has a desire as an alum to be Florida's head coach. So the coaching distraction, if you want to call it an excuse, yeah, that wouldn't fly either. There's nothing about this game that says Oregon should lose. They can lose, but that would be shortcomings of the staff. Then you'd call into question whether or not Oregon would make the college football playoff. But this would be the biggest win for Dan Lanning over Washington. And I don't think that he has to win this game to sell himself to the Oregon fan base or to hold off talks of job insecurity or anything like that. You got to win this game to ensure there's a home playoff game played at Autzen Stadium this year. And you have to win this game to ensure that there isn't a cloud that kind of hovers over the program. And you know what? This sort of stuff in college sports, you can call it a self-fulfilling prophecy or not. It can be very real. Tennessee beat Florida, and Florida's terrible. Fired Billy Napier a while ago this season. Florida has been bad for the last several years. Tennessee won last weekend in the Swamp for the first time, I believe, since 2000. Just let that sink in. This sort of stuff, it can happen. So I think for Oregon going into this spot, just a quick snapshot of the game. Their passing defense has to be better than it was last week. I think 27 points can be enough to score, or to allow rather, and say, hey, offense, you got to get 28 or more to win this game on the road. But I think Oregon's defense is capable of more than that. I think they will play better than that. Washington has one receiver who's as good as the guys that USC rolled out. Maybe two. Maybe two. This is not the same level of a receiving corps as what the Ducks faced last week. So I think there would be real questions about the Oregon secondary and the opponents they went up against, and whether or not their stats were overinflated. If they have a bounce back in this game, I think it would reinstill confidence in that group. But if Damon Williams goes for 320 yards and a couple touchdowns and doesn't have a turnover, because at least last week Oregon sacked Jade Maava a couple times and also forced him into 2 interceptions, both of which were critical in that game. If Damon Williams goes crazy in this one, there will be some questions asked as to what exactly is going on, how good that group can be going into the playoff. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below, because I want to know where you guys' heads are at. I do feel like Oregon's going to win the game. I haven't officially made my prediction. That'll come tomorrow on the show. But I don't think that... I saw this debate running in the YouTube comments the other day. Does this game scare you more than USC last week? My answer is yes, because it's on the road. And though USC was revved up for the game last week, I mean, one of their athletic administrators was certainly revved up, and whoever wrote their communications or their game notes from the communications department was a different kind of revved up. But we know they were ready to go and ready to give Oregon their best swing, and Oregon controlled the game after they allowed the opening drive touchdown. So I think that if Oregon comes out and plays the same game they did last week, I think they have a good chance to win. Clean up the penalties. Don't allow as many explosive plays. I'll talk about that in the second segment. But just from a big picture standpoint, and for Dan Lanning specifically, let me know your thoughts in the comments below, because you want to, the James Franklin narrative wasn't built in a day. It happened over many instances. Washington is a good team. They are good enough to win this football game. If Oregon goes in there and wins it, that'll be a strong feather in Dan Lanning's cap. So, how does Oregon do that? I shall tell you. First, this episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there is no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. And Oregon's favored by 6.5. If you think the Ducks are going to Seattle and steamroll, hey, if Oregon wins and covers comfortably for that number, I think we're all going to feel pretty good on Saturday. If Oregon doesn't cover, it's going to be a stressful few hours that are taking place up in Seattle for all of us to watch. However you feel on this game or other college football action, FanDuel's the place to do it. Right now, FanDuel's giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. I was thinking about this earlier when I was getting ready for the show. This shirt that I'm wearing, old school. Got the old school Oregon wings. I think the uniforms look good. Yellow helmet, green O, white jersey, green pants. It's a good combo. I'm here for it. I think I've had this shirt since I was in 8th grade, which is crazy because that was 50% of the years that I've been on this planet ago, also known as 14. So, man, that's crazy stuff. Crazy stuff. Let's talk about how Oregon wins this game against Washington. So I can go in a number of different directions on any week and sell you on, man, this guy's going to matter, this guy's going to matter. But there is one very clear and obvious position group that I think has to play well this week. And it's the linebacking core. That doesn't mean the offensive line isn't important or the defensive line. Everybody's important in a game like this. Oregon played a very complete matchup against USC last week, including special teams, and that's a big reason why they were able to get the win. If Oregon's linebackers struggle in this one, I think Oregon's defense could have some problems. I feel that way about this game as much as I have felt that way about any game so far this season. This is game 12. That was fast. So the reason I say the linebackers are important are twofold. Number one, Damon Williams is the best athlete that Oregon has seen at quarterback this year. I actually would have to do some thinking to go back to the last time Oregon faced someone like this. Now, they've faced a couple mobile quarterbacks like Mark Gronowski. Damon Williams is not going to lumber forward and pick up 5 to 6 yards and just kind of sludge his way through the defense. Damon Williams is the fastest quarterback that Oregon has faced in a while. I'm actually trying to think. The Big Ten has a lot of the big, immobile but accurate guys. I'm thinking Ethan Kaliakmanis at Rutgers, Drake Lindsey at Minnesota, Mark Gronowski at Iowa. Like, that's just such a typical, whoever Wisconsin's had the last couple of years, that's just a very typical mold. Now, Oregon saw Damon Williams last year at Autzen Stadium, of course, sacked him 10 times, and he was still 17 of 20 throwing the ball. Dude's impressive. He's got a good arm. He's an accurate thrower, but his legs are a big part, not just of the improvised game, but of the scheme that Jed Fish, who is their head coach and play caller in Seattle, he will call design runs, and it's not like Dante Moore where it's a situational moment of, okay, let's just pick this up and, get the numbers advantage running a quarterback. No, Oregon doesn't run Dante Moore on 2nd down and 8 or 1st and 10. Washington will. Washington absolutely will. So the reason I say the linebackers are important is Jerry Mixon, who has played much better, they all have, frankly, in the last several weeks, they're going to be really tested in this spot in 2 areas. Number one, as I just mentioned, the design quarterback run game, whether that is a sweep to the outside or kind of a power look quarterback draw. Oregon's linebackers have to be ready for that. But number 2 is the quarterback spy game. I can't imagine that Tosh Lupoi and Dan Lanning are going to come up with a game plan that involves consistently leaving Damon Williams unspied. I think you could see some double spies in this game. And yeah, that might leave a bevy of one-on-one opportunities out there. But man, Brandon Finney, I've got faith in him even after last week. Jaden Kennedy played awesome against Mekhi Lemon. And yeah, Washington's got a couple of other receivers that can make plays, but I don't think you can let Damon Williams' legs take over this game. Because once you do that, think back to the Mariota days, which frankly as a runner, stylistically, is kind of who he is. He's smaller than Mariota. He's got a little Kyler Murray to him. That's who he reminds me of. He's got a little Kyler Murray to his game. He is so quick and he hits the accelerator so fast that containing him, yeah, the defensive linemen have to be able to stay in their rush lanes. That's important. But it's the linebackers. So twofold with the quarterback run game, they're going to be tested with that. Secondarily, Jonah Coleman, and they've got a couple other guys that you'll hear about on tomorrow's show from Roman. They've been at their best when they can run the ball. And we've seen Oregon's linebackers this year. It's been hit and miss. Now, the run defense against USC last week, phenomenally good. I think the caliber of this Washington run game is pretty similar. USC has run the ball well this year. They didn't against Oregon last week. And they threw it well, but they only scored 27 points. I think Washington's similar in that sense. But I think it's more important for the Huskies than the Trojans because Washington likes to run a lot of NFL concepts. That's where Jed Fish comes from, where Damon Williams is under center, and they have the run game as something that really complements their pass game. I've talked about that with Oregon plenty this year. Any offense is going to use it. I think Oregon uses it more to keep you off balance and get different looks. Washington uses play action in a way that'll make you feel like you're watching Sunday football. You'll have receivers go in a jet motion. You'll have play action boots from under center. And Oregon does that sometimes as well. They don't do it a ton. Washington certainly does that a little bit more. So the run game, important to any offense. I think especially for Washington, they do not want to be in straight drop back passing situations. I think Oregon's more capable of doing that. So the linebackers are just going to be huge for this defensive game plan. So my three keys to win in this game, that was just the position group breakdown there of who I think is most important. Three keys to win in this game. Number one, limit explosives. Washington has a number of different guys, whether it is Damon Williams and, the health of Jonah Coleman, Denzel Boston up in the air. I'm presuming they're going to play, and they were probably resting a little bit against Purdue because Purdue's not very good in Barry Odom's first season. But I think you've got to limit the explosives. And anytime you go on the road to a place that has a great environment, not every place is like that, by the way. I don't think Maryland has some incredible home field advantage. USC is not outrageously loud. Neither is UCLA. But a place like Washington in this rivalry game, it's going to be sold out Husky Stadium. They're going to be going crazy. And a great way to get them really going if you're Washington is have an explosive play. But they've got the guys to do it. Denzel Boston, Damon Williams with his legs. He can throw it down the field as well. And Jonah Coleman can break long runs. So I think if you make this Washington offense dink and dunk you a bit going up and down the field, I don't think they're as dangerous in that sort of setting. Their execution is good, but I'd rather make them earn it going up and down the field than giving them explosives. So limiting those, I think, is essential. An explosive play, by definition, for those who don't know, is a pass play of 20 yards or more and a run play of 15 yards or more. So key number two, talked about this a lot, contain Damon Williams. Yes, he is a good passer. I am far more worried about him as a runner than as a thrower. And if he stands in the pocket and slices and dices the defense, all right, dude is making plays. And that's entirely possible. He was really efficient against the Ducks defense at Autzen last year. What I don't want is for the secondary to have to cover in a bunch of scramble drill spots. I think if you go back and watch the Michigan game, they did a good job of taking that away. And when he did scramble, they were ready to contain him and didn't let him create those spots. They picked him off 3 times in the second half. So containing Damon Williams and not letting him get out on passing plays, like obvious quarterback runs, yeah, okay, he's going to pick up some yards and maybe get to the edge a couple times. That goes back to the first key. Make it not an explosive, because if he gets in the open field, man, he's fast. He is really, really quick. So containing him on passing plays, very important. Then the third one is establishing some early momentum, particularly with the ground game. Last year, what Oregon did a good job of was about 7 different things, frankly. But I think they did a good job in the second half of really dominating up front. And I think when you watch this Oregon team, whether it's Minnesota, where they didn't start perfectly on the ground, but then got themselves going a bit and stuck with it, when they get hot, and when Will Stein is seeing things really well and making the right types of run game calls, that's when Oregon is dangerous. Because then you can put together a drive like they had at the end of the USC game, where it's just run, run, run. Oh, we sense they're going to sell out for the run. Let me hit you with a quick play action pass, and Dante Moore makes the right read, and the guy usually runs open because they're selling out for the run game. So that's what I like about this Oregon offense. And there's nothing more demoralizing, and I know that the Washington fans have seen this because the end of the Pete Carroll era with the Seahawks had happened a lot. Nothing takes a crowd out of it more than a dominating run game. It is incredibly demoralizing. So that momentum component, I think, can be neutralized. Oregon's the best rushing team statistically in the Big Ten. So the linebackers are the most important group. 3 biggest keys: limit the explosives, contain Damon Williams, and establish some early momentum, particularly with the ground game in Seattle. You do 2 of those 3 things, I think Oregon will be just fine. What about Kenyon Sadiq? Well, let's talk about that. First, this episode brought to you by Omaha Steaks. The holidays feel a little easier when you already know your perfect gift. And Omaha Steaks makes it almost too simple. Whether you're treating yourself this season or sending something memorable to family and friends, Omaha Steaks delivers handcrafted perfection right to their door. And this week is the best time to jump in because there's cyber sales here and the deals are huge. I'll tell you about that in a moment after I tell you about what you can send your family and friends. The quality for Omaha Steaks is exactly what you hope for. Incredibly tender steaks, rich flavor, and meals that make hosting or weeknight cooking easier. And I am someone that cares very deeply about food, like I care very deeply about Oregon. Omaha Steaks will give you what you want. Save big, get ready for this, on unforgettable gifts with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide and an extra 20% off select favorites during their cyber sale. Did you hear that? I'm not done. And for an additional $35 off, use the promo code COLLEGE at checkout. They're just trying to save you money and give you their great steaks. That's omahasteaks.com, promo code COLLEGE. Terms apply. See site for details. Check out Omaha Steaks today. Kenyon Sadiq has been awesome, leading Oregon in receiving yards each of the last 2 games. I don't think that changes this week. Maybe Garrett Bryant returns. I doubt Evan Stewart plays. I'm not super confident Decorian Moore is going to be able to go. And guess what? Kenyon Sadiq is just that type of guy. So, speaking of which, I got an SSA on him. SSA, Kenyon Sadiq comes back if and only if. I think of the math principle. I think it's algebra, maybe geometry, IFF, anytime someone says that. Anyway, Sadiq comes back if and only if Oregon makes it to the national championship game and loses it in a walk-off field goal. Is that the only scenario in which Kenyon Sadiq would come back? Yeah, I think I'm kind of with you here. He's a finalist for the Mackey Award, given the top tight end in college football. I think he's going to win it. Every mock draft I've seen has him as the first tight end taken, probably in the first round. Yeah, I'm going to put that at a 9, actually. That's just about the only scenario where Oregon could get him back. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. I actually never do. But hey, I've been wrong before when I think I'm right. Been known to happen. So, Matthew, here's an SSA, and call me a conspiracy theorist. I don't care. With the total amount of possible games the Ducks have left, what's saying Dan is holding Stewart out until Washington? That way he can keep his red shirt. Could be reading too much into it, but I wouldn't put it past this staff. 8. It's on Matthew's scale of agreement, I guess. It's an 8. Yeah, I'm not... I'm with the sentiment you throw in there. I wouldn't put it past this staff. Sure, whatever it takes to win. And they never say anything about injuries. But the redshirt thing, he could play in 4 regular season games and still have a redshirt year available for next season. I think if Evan Stewart's going to play this year, it'll come in a college football playoff game. So I'm going to put this at a 2. Another one, DeCorian is back for Washington and Evan is back for the playoffs. This is higher than 2. Evan Stewart being back for the playoffs. But you put DeCorian in there back for this week as well. I'll put this at a 3.5. 3. Yeah, I'll put that at a 3.5. If I were to separate them, DeCorian being back for Washington is a 2.5, and Evan Stewart being back for the playoffs is a 5. As in, I think it's just as likely to happen as not. So, speaking of which, just generally with the injuries, it's encouraging from my vantage point to see where Oregon is capable of getting to, even if they are battling injuries. The receiving core being down this many guys. Think about everyone. If you go back to, let's say, post-spring game, we would have thought, Evan Stewart was still battling an injury at that time, so why don't we pick a show in the middle of May? In the middle of May, if someone had sent me, hey, what's your receiver depth chart right now? Evan Stewart would have been on it. Jurion Dickey would have been on it. Kyler Casper would have been on it. None of those guys are currently playing or able to play for the Ducks. Casper's out for the season. Dickey's no longer with the team. Stewart may or may not play at all this year. That doesn't even factor in Gary Bryan has been hurt. DeCorian Moore has been hurt. Jeremiah McClellan's been dinged up a couple times. The receiving depth is just wild. And I think Will Stein also deserves a lot of credit for the way he has used 12 personnel, 1 back, 2 tight ends, and used that to create different looks in the passing game that are still successful and explosive. And Kenyon Sadiq being able to just play wide receiver is indeed a cheat code. He is just not like anybody else. So, another couple SSAs here. Oregon Ducks are more nationally criticized over uniform combos and funding than the SEC playoff committee biased is and ever has been criticized. Dan is the man for finally speaking out on the matter. More coaches should do the same. Yeah, I don't think anybody else gets criticized for uniforms or takes flack, at least that I'm aware. More than the SEC playoff committee is... I talked about Lanning's comments about SEC scheduling earlier this week, and I was all about it. You know what? Oregon's more nationally criticized for uniform 10. That's a 10. That's 10. I already aired the agreement earlier this week about, I'm fully with Dan Lanning on calling out the SEC for playing a cupcake at the end of the year. And I can't think of a school that takes more flack for it because Oregon did it first. So, not that there weren't other good uniforms, but Oregon did it first. We all know it. Last one. For the SSA, not only did the USC game prove that Alik Terry is Dana Altman's twin, but it also will diminish the amount of fringe players transferring out this year because they saw so many players get opportunities. This is a really good angle to think about it, and I hadn't really before I saw this question, but I thought about it a little and went, man, I think you could be right. Oregon in the Dan Lanning era still hasn't had a starter transfer out of the program. That's a pretty remarkable thing. But among these guys, Charlie Pickard is a redshirt senior, so he can't come back. But Kavika Rogers, not sure off the top of my head if he has another year. I feel like he's been at Oregon for a really, really long time. But, a guy like Fox Crater, for instance, if he's not a starter going into next season, or if Janoris Wilson isn't, I think it does. Oh, Kavika Rogers, by the way, redshirt junior. So, no, he could still come back. I'm going to give that one an 8. I don't know about, I'm separating out the Dana Altman's twin part. Things are not going well for Dana Altman at the moment. The day this show airs, they play Creighton. Last time Oregon played Creighton, that was a heartbreaker. And the Ducks could use a win, or else they'll walk out of Vegas 0-3, while spending Thanksgiving Day there. So, just sequestering that part out of it. Yeah, I think it's great those guys are seeing action. I think it absolutely does when you see, oh, wait, they don't just trust me enough to play in this spot, but if I'm the backup again next year and they think I'm going to start the following year for 2 seasons, well, clearly that means I can see the field in some capacity. So, yeah, I'm going to give that one an 8. I like that take. Crossover with Roman coming tomorrow. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.